This is a Fox News alert. President Trump right now flying to Orlando, Florida to give a speech at a police convention. And he has a special guest on Air Force One, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Oh, this is going to get interesting. This comes after last month's New York Times report that Rosenstein had discussed secretly recording the president and possibly removing him from office under the 25th Amendment. Rosenstein denies that report. Here's the president this morning.
We'll be talking on the plane. I actually have a good relationship other than there's been no collusion, folks, no collusion. No, I don't. I didn't know Rod before, but I've gotten to know him, and I get along very well with him.
Rosenstein expected to meet with White House Republicans on Thursday. Here's House Intelligence Committee Chair Nunes on his questions for the Deputy AG.
I think it all comes down to whether or not he was willing to wear a wire or not. If he was willing to wear a wire and secretly record the president, Maria, it's someplace that this country's never been before. I don't know of any time in the history of this country where you had people who are at the top levels of government conspiring to secretly record a president so that you can trap the president into doing so, into being able to go after the 25th Amendment to remove the president.
This meeting also comes after former top FBI official James Baker told investigators last week that a DNC-linked lawyer was feeding information to the agency prior to its launch of an investigation into the 2016 Trump campaign. Here's what Congressman Nunes had to say about that.
Well, now you have one of the top lawyers for the Democrats and the Clinton campaign who was feeding information directly to the top lawyer at the FBI before even the FISA warrant. So now you have absolute proof that that wasn't told to the FISA court. So you want your evidence of FISA abuse? There it is right there.
All right, so Nancy Pelosi says that she wants those 302s from the FBI investigation into Brett Kavanaugh. Nunes wants all of this information regarding Fusion GPS and any sort of interface they had with Department of Justice or FBI officials. Are we going to get to see any of this?
I don't know, but I'm just sort of reminded that with all the Kavanaugh controversy over the last few weeks, that whole Russia conversation, it's all gone away. It's all these names from ancient history now. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. You know, how long is it since we've talked about them? I don't know what Devin Nunes...
I've enjoyed the break.
Me too, frankly. Devin Nunes, I don't know what he's talking about. Well, first of all, yeah, on your question, yes, we should get the information. Absolutely right. Because it's quite clear to me, and I think everyone watching this, that there are certainly grounds for suspicion that the permanent bureaucracy, the Obama holdovers, both before the election and after, were up to no good. How bad, how serious, we don't know. We need the information, but there's clearly something to investigate there. Nunes' point on Rosenstein, I don't quite understand what he's talking about there. It's not just whether he actually went through the process of wearing a wire or not. The fact that he was even thinking about it, talking about it, and discussing it shows he's totally disloyal and has no place being in the administration. However, it seems to me that President Trump, it's quite interesting what he's doing now, feels as if prior to this revelation and this report in the New York Times, Rosenstein was in quite a strong position with respect to the president because he was basically there unfireable because it would have been such an outrage if he did that. Now his position is much, much weaker because this has been revealed. And it seems to me that the president
And look at the people who have been removed since that investigation
Yes, and the president's
launched.
probably saying, you know what, actually, I've got this guy where I want him now because he's much more vulnerable than he was before. And that's probably why, as it seems likely, he's not going to
Well,
fire him.
Steve brings up a good point, Harrison. That's context, because when you are in a private text exchange with your paramour or with your friends, I think you have much more license to say pretty much whatever you want. And you can say, hey, this was a personal joke between two people. I don't have to describe any of this. But when you're in a work context and you're talking about things like removing the president via the 25th Amendment or secretly either wearing a wire or have someone else wearing a wire, that's not necessarily funny. I mean, you are in a work setting, and maybe the president is offloading some of that heavy lifting to Congress so they can ask those tough questions.
That's a possibility. I do think it's interesting, as Steve points out, that now the leverage is gone for Rosenstein.
Yes.
He's in a position of capitulation, really, and now he's on Air Force One. So you talk about what you would say in front of your boss and what you wouldn't say. We've heard all sorts of things. You brought up it's not funny because it's been suggested that perhaps it was a joke, and I don't know how you joke about getting, because that's the same sort of narrative that we had between Strzok and Page. Get rid of the president before he's in the White House. I mean, is it a question of bias? I'm certain that would come up, at least with Congress. Does it come up on Air Force One?
Well, what happens? He's obviously in a place where Rod Rosenstein can't just slam the door and walk out of an uncomfortable meeting. He can't take his badge off and
he could parachute out. You're going to need a parachute if he exits.
I think it'll actually be far more cordial and friendly than
you
would
think
assume.
The point
based
of
on,
it is what leverage does this kind of put back and forth?
Well, I think the president has also enjoyed a few weeks break from the Russia investigation, and he already said, I think, we have a good relationship. He's a good man. He needs to make it through the midterms. I think that his team has made that clear to him, that you can't have any upheaval on the Mueller side of things. Going into the midterms, especially since the GOP has gotten a boost out of the Kavanaugh hearings. So if he goes and he fires someone like A.G. Sessions or Rod Rosenstein, when you look at public opinion polls on this, you will inflame a part of the country, the independents, for instance, that might have been on your side about that.
But you don't have to invite him on Air Force One. That's.
Well, I think it's to say I'm in charge, right?
Yeah,
he works for me. He comes on. He comes in my fancy car in the sky, and we do things on my terms. But I think it'll be very like, hey, you like Diet Coke? I like Diet Coke.
I'm fascinated by it.
Or chocolate cake, or maybe 2 scoops of ice cream, which are all delicious things.
And
that
cheeseburgers.
I agree with President Trump. Yeah. But look, I think he should wait until after the midterms and then fire him, because I don't trust the guy. He lays out the case for firing James Comey.
Exactly.
And then he appoints a special counsel to look into the firing of James Comey. So that right there makes no sense to me and is super sketchy. Another thing that's super sketchy is this information about James Baker, who was a top FBI attorney who was at the heart of the surveillance. And now we know that he met with a Democrat Party attorney.
A meeting that he described as atypical.
Atypical, exactly. Abnormal, atypical. Weeks before they launched the surveillance into Carter Page and the investigation into the Trump campaign. And remember also that we know that the dossier was used to obtain a FISA warrant, which is an opposition piece of research, still unverified. And even Christopher Steele has admitted in a London court that parts of it are false and fictitious.
Well,
mind you, we're still at a point where Carter Page has not been charged with anything, and not a single person on the Trump world has been tied to any sort of collusion. So we are here, and we're looking at all these sketchy things are coming together.
Just very quick, but I just totally agree with you, Lisa, that he has to be fired. You cannot have a situation where someone so senior is so clearly disloyal, plotting against the head of the executive branch.
I think what the president does here. So I think what the president does here is he keeps him until after the midterms. He's only got a month.
And keeps him close.
And then he allows Congress to ask him those questions, lay the case out, get some answers from him, show blatant hypocrisy, and then he'll have grounds.
Real quickly,
to fire.
Kennedy, lesson learned from James Comey?
We have learned so many lessons from James Comey, and
in terms of the firing, because even Jessica has said that Hillary Clinton would have fired Comey right out the gate.
Day one. Absolutely.
And I would not have been mad about it at all.
I don't think anyone on this couch would be. So.